Greetings and welcome to the channel. It's Mikhailov from Team Retrogue, where we like retro games and the devices that bring them to us. So we have two controllers here with us today. We have the EasySMX D08 and the 8BitDo Ultimate 2 controller. These are two powerful controllers. They both have charging stations and they both do different things and come in at two different price points. So in this video, we're going to take a look at both of them. We're going to put them through their paces, do some of our regular retro game testing, and we're going to see if they're worth your hard-earned dollar bucks. So let's dive in and get to work. At time of recording, both of these controllers can be purchased on Amazon. The EasySMX D05 is available for $44.99 with a $12 off coupon. The 8BitDo Ultimate 2 is available for $59.99. The D05 was sent to me by EasySMX, and the 8BitDo Ultimate 2 was sent to me by Acnus for the purposes of this review. As is always required, all opinions are my own, I'm not being paid, and they are not seeing this video before it is published. So let's take a look at the different features of these controllers, starting with the EasySMX D05. This controller features Hall effect joysticks and triggers, programmable rear buttons, turbo programming, and RGB lighting. The controller has a 1000 Hz polling rate and comes with a charging station that turns the controller on when removed and off when docked. The controller is compatible with iOS, Android, PC, and Nintendo Switch, utilizing either a Bluetooth connection or a 2.4 GHz dongle. The 8BitDo Ultimate 2 controller features TMR joysticks and Hall effect triggers, which are adjustable via a trigger switch. There are programmable rear and top buttons, a 6-axis gyro, vibration, RGB lighting, and turbo programming. The controller also has a 1000 Hz polling rate when in 2.4 GHz mode or wired mode, and also comes with a charging station that turns the controller on when removed and off when docked. For power, the controller is equipped with a 1000 mAh battery. The controller is compatible with PC and Android via Bluetooth or a 2.4 GHz dongle. Unboxing the EasySMX D05 gives us a pretty detailed user manual in multiple languages, the charging stand, controller, and USB-C connector cable. When we unbox the Ultimate 2, front and center is the controller and the charging stand with dongle storage, a quick start guide, and a USB-C connector cable. Alright, so let's take a look at these two controllers. Now we usually do a device tour when we're doing a controller review, and we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to compare these two controllers at the same time. So I want to start with the triggers on these devices. So we're going to start here at the top. And if you take a look at the 8BitDo controller, you could see that this is a similar design to other offerings by 8BitDo, where they have your LT and LB. You also have these programmable L4 and R4 buttons. And let's go ahead and test the sound here. So we're going to start with the bumpers. And these are extra clicky. And also these programmable buttons, these are extra clicky as well. These are actually very noisy. And then if you take a look, they do seem to have a regular amount of travel on the triggers with no noticeable click or anything when you hit the bottom. You also have on the back of the 8BitDo controller, you have these trigger switches. You know, if you've been keeping an eye on any of my videos, that I am very much a fan of these trigger switches. And if you turn them on, now you have a very clicky digital trigger as opposed to an analog trigger with a lot of travel. You could change these depending on your settings. Now, if we go to the EasySMX controller, you're actually going to find that the bumpers are not nearly as noisy, and they also have this really nice textured grip that the 8BitDo controller just doesn't have. And I've reviewed quite a few controllers on this channel that have had these nice ergonomic textured grips, and these are actually curved so that they fit the curvature of your finger, and this is a very nice resting position for holding this controller. And that's not necessarily something that you have here with the 8BitDo. These are actually very flat. You can rest your fingers on them, but they're just not as comfortable. This is a very comfortable experience, and let's do our bumper test here. These are not nearly as noisy, and they're actually kind of a bit on the mushy side. There is an audible click, but it is not nearly as bad as on the 8BitDo. You can actually see the amount of travel here due to the transparent back on this controller. This is a really nice feeling controller. This is something that seems to be designed for comfort in mind as opposed to anything else. So obviously you don't have the programmable buttons at the top, but I never use these on a controller when I do have them. I've just never programmed buttons. I've always just used the regular buttons as they are. So I guess it depends on your use case. If you need to program these extra buttons, you can. If you're looking for more comfort, then you're probably better off the EasySMX. One thing I have to say I don't like is that the USB-C port on the EasySMX controller is recessed. I'm not a fan of that because it limits the amount of USB-C cables that you can actually use, whereas it's flush here. You can use pretty much any USB-C charger that you may have available to charge this controller. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the front, and you could see these controllers are pretty similar. The 8BitDo arches down into a more flatter, I almost want to say less comfortable controller, whereas the EasySMX is a more angled controller, and they're both fine as far as being able to hold them and use them. I feel, again, like the EasySMX is more designed for comfort, and the 8BitDo Ultimate 2 is designed more for functionality. Up here, you have plus and minus to signify your start and select, and then you also have the 8BitDo button, which functions as a home button, and then this star button is used for extra features such as turbo and all that. Now, one thing I like about 8BitDo is that these start and select buttons are very prominent at the top here, very easy to access, very noticeable and tactile. However, on this controller, they're a little bit more recessed inward. They're actually in the same place as the extra buttons are on the controller, and I'm actually okay with either placement. I would say this is about equal as far as comfort goes, but I do like that the extra buttons are more centered on the EasySMX. I don't mind their positioning here, but when you've used multiple controllers like I do, sometimes you just get confused as to where start and select are, and you accidentally press extra functions when you mean to press start and select. And so that's just a me problem. I don't think that's anything that will affect any of you fine viewers, because you probably are going to just pick one of these and stick with it, and you're just going to get accustomed to it. And so let's test out the D-pad noise. Now, the 8BitDo, actually, where it's extra clicky in the bumpers, it's very mushy on the D-pad. There is an audible click, but it's muffled. I do feel like there's just not a lot of travel here, so we'll have to do the contra test later to see how responsive it is. For accessing menus or changing weapons, it's fine. I'm not sure how this is going to be for actual retro gaming. The joysticks on these two devices, those are going to be fine either way. I don't have a preference as to the material or the form on the joystick. These are a little bit more recessed. These have a bit more of a bump to them in the middle, but they both feel fine. Let's go ahead and test the D-pad on the SMX. Whoa. That's weird. It definitely has a lot more of a click, but right here, right there, just here on the left, that's got some weird extra clickiness to it. Now that said, this actually feels a lot more flexible. Ooh, thunk, thunk, ooh. That's an odd noise, and it's weird that it's just the left. But this actually feels a lot more flexible, and this one feels a little bit more stiff. Yeah, it's just not as loud. Even if I flick it like this, like, you don't get that loud clack clack, you just get a regular clack clack. And so let's turn these around and take a look at the back. You're going to find that they are very similar in the sense that you have two programmable back buttons. The only difference being that the EasySMX does not have trigger switches, while the 8BitDo controller does have trigger switches. And so both of these come with their own charging stand and their own dongle, whereas with the EasySMX, you do have those magnetic connections, and those are prominent here on the bottom, to which this controller will sit up just like that. It will turn off while it's on the charger, and it will turn on when you take it off the charger. And then you also have on the back, you have your dongle output and you have your USB-C connection so that you can plug it into the computer. And you have the same for the 8BitDo, except these magnetic connections are on the back. This is how the controller rests. I've always liked the way that these 8BitDo controllers have looked sitting on these chargers like this. It's just, it all fits together and it looks really nice. And the one thing that I actually really like is that 8BitDo actually manages to hide the dongle right here underneath the device, and you don't have to ever take this out. You just leave that right there where you found it, and you just plug this into the back with the USB-C port, and then that's all you have to do, and you're going to get a nice working controller. In either case, this is not a big deal, because if you look at the dongle on the EasySMX, it's a nano dongle. So this will go in. It is a little bit stiff, and I don't know why that is. I'm not sure as to the quality if you were to take these in or out, because I keep hitting and bumping things. Ultimately, this is fine because this is going to be facing front, and so you're not going to see this nano bump hanging out. So either one of these, if you're looking for a solution for a controller with a charging port or a charging stand, these are both going to be just fine. Okay, so now let's take a look at these two controllers in action. So here we have the EasySMX plugged in. You could see by the indicator light that it is charging, and it looks like when you remove it, you do have to power it on. Maybe that's just because I'm powering on for the first time. One thing I will tell you is that because of this transparent shell, or this at least half transparent shell, you're going to get a ton of light bleed with these RGB lights. You could see it coming in through the bottom here, and you could kind of see it coming out through the top. It's not really all that great, but you can hold the function button and right on the D-pad, and you could see that's going to cycle through all the different lighting modes here. And if you press left on the D-pad, it's going to cycle through a whole bunch of different brightness settings. Also, hitting the function button and the down button will adjust your vibration settings, and the same with the up button. And so we have a nice blue here, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off just so it comes out better on camera. So I'm actually not a fan of these RGB lights on this specific controller. I've seen it work so much better on other controllers. Here, not so great. Let's do contratest. Contratest seems to be doing what it's supposed to. If I wiggle, I'm staying ducked, and if I trigger intentional diagonals, I'm getting intentional diagonals. So D-pad looks pretty good there for the contratest. This is very good. I'm able to hit pretty much all of the moves I want. I'm getting a over 90% success rate as far as Hadoukens go. Let's try a Shoryuken. Nope, that was a Hadouken. There we go. I mean, sometimes I'm getting Hadoukens, sometimes I'm getting Shoryukens, sometimes I'm getting nothing. I would say the Shoryukens are the hardest thing to pull off here. I think if I were to get used to this or actually be good at fighting games, I think I'd be able to pull this off just fine. Charging indicator at the top. Let's go ahead and take this off, and this one will turn on, and that was almost instantaneous. Let's do that again. Off. On. Off. On. That was an almost instantaneous connection. That's... wow. Wow, 8BitDo. That's really cool. That was very quick on the uptake. Now this D-pad is not quite as rock solid. You could see I'm actually triggering accidental diagonals here just by wiggling my finger back and forth. And so this probably isn't going to be as precision. At least it fails the contratest. Now I'm actually having a tougher time with this D-pad. Yes, I'm getting out my super Hadoukens here as Ryu. I'm getting my regular Hadoukens. I have a slightly less success rate, but it's not by much. I would say it's still in the 90s. If I were to throw a number out there, it's still a pretty good success rate for Hadoukens. Let's go try Shoryukens, because you saw with the EasySMX, I was having a much harder time with Shoryukens. Here, though, look at that. Almost every... No, there we go. Now we got some... I was getting too cocky. I'm definitely doing it more, but there are still times where I accidentally Hadouken. Again, that could just be me. It just seems a little bit easier here. So I would say this would be the fighting game controller. This would be the platformer controller. I would also say that the 8BitDo would probably be your shooter controller, just because of those trigger switches. And the EasySMX would be your racing controller due to the adjustable sensitivity and the fact that there are no trigger switches, so you're always analog. All right, so let's take a look at some of the features of the 8BitDo controller here. Let's start with turbo. So if I hold X and I press the turbo button once, we're going to go into regular turbo mode. And if I hit it again, it turns it off. If I want auto mode, I'm going to hold the button and I'm going to press the star button twice. And now, when I press the button, it just automatically goes. I'm not touching anything, but the button here is being pressed. And then if I want to turn it off, I just do the same action again. So now let's actually try to program a button. Let's say I wanted this R4 button to be X. I'm going to hold R4, X, and square at the same time. And that's going to map that button. So you can see here, I'm pressing this button, and it's mapped to X, so I'm now shooting. I would never play Mega Man like this, but now the option is there. And then if I want to clear it, I'll just hold the button and press square again. And you can see now it doesn't do anything. Now, if you hold star and move the D-pad, you can actually bounce back and forth between different color options for your LED lights. And then you can also adjust the brightness. And I feel like this does a much better job than... And I feel that this does a much better job than the EasySMX controller. And there's no light bleed. You just have a nice subtle LED light. And you could adjust the brightness as necessary. And you could even turn this off if you want. And if you press the star button just by itself, that will cycle you through the different modes. Like here's a firing mode. Here's a regular mode. This is off. And this is a light tracing mode. So when you use one stick, then the other stick will light up the corresponding color so you can actually see what direction you are depressing, which is actually kind of cool. I like that. And I kind of like that it does the opposite stick, so you can actually see the effect without your finger covering it. I think that's actually really cool. And then finally, as far as compatibility goes, this controller will only work on Windows and Android. So if you want to switch it to Android mode, you just use the Bluetooth toggle on the back. But you're only limited to Windows and Android on this controller. And then on the EasySMX controller, you can actually use this on PC, iOS, Android, and Nintendo Switch. And you just have to hold the home button and a specific combination in order to switch it into that type of pairing mode. But you can use the GameSir app if you choose, and that's one of the great things about a controller like this is how flexible it actually is. Okay, now that we've done our typical round of controller testing, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my final thoughts. Let's start with the positives on the EasySMX D05. This controller is very decently priced for the amount of features you receive. At $44.99 with that $12 off coupon, this controller is cheaper than all first-party offerings by Microsoft and Nintendo, and is a really nice all-in-one controller for both those systems as well as PC, iOS, and Android. The ergonomics are also really nice. The controller is shaped properly and feels really good in the hand. Getting into the negatives, the D05 has a very loud D-pad that probably isn't the best for fighting games, but is actually good for platformers. I still can't get over the fact that the left side of the D-pad is louder than the rest of it. There is quite a bit of RGB light bleed, which will probably just motivate you to turn the LED lights off and call it a day. And the last point is more of a me problem, because so many controllers come and go through the studio these days. I've actually been spoiled by the ability to switch between analog and digital triggers via a switch, and the fact that there is no switch on this controller is kind of a bummer, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker. Moving on to the 8BitDo Ultimate 2, this controller has buttons galore. You could program up to 4 extra buttons, which makes this controller extra customizable, especially when you could save 3 different profiles to the controller's memory. The RGB lighting is actually really good here, with no light bleed and comfortable lighting settings, not too bright, and it actually really blew me away how fast this controller connects. It's almost instant, which will get you gaming right away. However, the D-pad isn't perfect here either. It's the opposite problem of the D05. It's better for fighting games than it is for platformers. The bumpers at the top are also extra loud and clacky, almost to the point of distracting, and this controller is a bit pricey. Considering the options out there for less money, it's a bit hard to recommend at $60. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Is one of these controllers for you, or do you have other options in mind? And please feel free to continue the conversation on the Retro Handhelds and Steam Machine Discords, where you could find me hanging out in between videos. And if you want to support the channel like these wonderful people on the screen, you can do so by going to my Patreon page. Links for all these places are in the description. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you in any way. Every smash of that button helps the channel grow and allows me to get more content out to you. But until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.